When we think about heart disease, we've got our usual lineup of suspects, right? Smoking, high blood pressure, and of course, the big one, cholesterol. But what if I told you that even when we round up all of those, a huge part of the case remains unsolved? Today, we're going full detective on a hidden risk factor, a clue that's been hiding in plain sight in our blood tests all along, but one we're only now really starting to get. So let's crack this case. Okay, so this is the scene of the crime. This is what we're all trying to prevent. An artery getting clogged up with plaque, a condition we call atherosclerosis. For decades, the entire investigation has pointed the finger at one thing, LDL, the so-called bad cholesterol. But the evidence is piling up that there's another accomplice, a key culprit helping to build these dangerous blockages. And get this is the scale of the mystery we're dealing with. A massive global study found that all those standard risk factors we know about, high cholesterol, smoking, diabetes, the works, they can only explain about half of all cardiovascular disease. That leaves almost 50% of the risk completely unaccounted for. That is a huge, huge gap in our understanding. Which, yeah, leads us to the big question, right? If it's not just the usual suspects, what else is going on here? What are we missing in this investigation? Well, the answer might just be hiding in a number you've probably seen on your lab reports and just kind of glossed over. We're talking about triglycerides, the overlooked clue that scientists are now taking a much, much closer look at. Yeah, for ages, we thought of triglycerides as cholesterol's sidekick, not the main villain. But we're now realizing they have their own story, a much darker one, and it is time to unmask the true threat they represent. All right, so quick primer. What even is a triglyceride? It's simply a type of fat or lipid that's in your blood. And the name actually tells you what it is. It's 3 fatty acid chains, that's the tri part, hooked onto a glycerol molecule. Your body uses them for energy. Simple enough, right? Well, not so fast. The story gets way more complicated. See, here's the thing. Triglycerides are fats, and our blood is mostly water. And as we all know, oil and water, they don't mix. So to get around in your bloodstream, they need to be packaged up and transported. And it's the way they're transported that's the real problem. They travel inside these little particles called triglyceride-rich lipoproteins, or TGRLs. Just think of them as delivery trucks. They're cruising through your arteries, and their cargo is a mix of triglycerides and cholesterol. But here's the catch. After they drop off their cargo, they leave behind these little remnant particles. And it's these leftover, broken down pieces of the delivery trucks that are the real troublemakers. And this is the bombshell. This quote from a new consensus statement by the International Atherosclerosis Society says it all. These TGRL remnants, the leftovers, are actually more likely to cause plaque than even LDL, the bad cholesterol we've been focused on for decades, particle for particle. That is an absolute game changer. Okay, so now that we know who the real culprit is, how do you figure out your own personal risk? Let's start identifying the factors that could point to you having high triglycerides. For most of us, it's not like there's one single bad gene causing the problem. It's what scientists call a polygenic risk. It basically means a bunch of small genetic factors all add up to create a predisposition. But what really lights the fuse is when that underlying genetic risk gets hit with secondary causes from our lifestyle. It's that combo of genes and life that creates the most common and, frankly, the most dangerous situation. And here are some of those common triggers. You can see they fall into a few categories. You've got medical conditions like diabetes and obesity. Then there's lifestyle stuff like high-carb diets and alcohol. And even some common medications like certain beta blockers can play a role. Any of these can push your triglyceride levels into the danger zone, especially if you already have that genetic tendency. All right, but here's the good news. Since we're getting so much better at identifying the culprit, we're also getting way smarter about how to fight it. So let's look at how we actually crack this case with the right treatments. But this hasn't been a straight shot. The history of trying to treat high triglycerides has been full of promising leads that turned into total dead ends. And honestly, it's created a lot of confusion for everyone. Take a class of drugs called fibrates, for example. A huge recent trial called Prominent tested a new one, and it worked. It lowered the triglyceride number on paper by over 26%. But, and this is a huge but, it did absolutely nothing to reduce heart attacks or strokes. This was a critical clue, right? It showed us that the target is way more complicated than just making a number on a lab report go down. This brings us to another area that is just swimming in confusion: omega-3s. We've all heard about the benefits of fish oil, but the science here is incredibly specific. And you really have to understand that not all omega-3s are created equal, not even close. So let's break this down because it is so important. On one side, you've got your dietary fish oil supplements from the health food store. They are totally unregulated, quality is all over the place, and big studies have shown no consistent heart benefit from them. But on the other side, you have a prescription FDA-approved therapy. It's a highly purified form of one specific omega-3 called EPA. The quality control is intense, and most importantly, it's been proven to work. And the evidence is just rock solid. One trial, called Evaporate, showed that this prescription EPA actually shrinks coronary plaque. And then the massive Reduce It trial found that it cut the risk of things like heart attacks and strokes by a whopping 25% in high-risk patients. I mean, that's the kind of hard data that separates real medicine from just marketing hype. But the story doesn't end there. Not even close. Armed with this much deeper understanding of the real problem, scientists are now developing a whole new class of therapies. Let's take a peek at the next chapter in this investigation. Yeah, instead of just treating the downstream effects, this next wave of medicine goes right to the root of the problem. They are literally targeting the genetic and molecular source code that controls how our bodies handle triglycerides in the first place. Here's how it works, and it's so elegant. So picture this. Your body has these natural brakes. They're proteins with names like APOC3 and ANGPTL3, and their job is to slow down how quickly you clear triglycerides from your blood. These new therapies are designed to inhibit these inhibitors. In other words, they're designed to cut the brakes, which lets your body's natural cleanup system run at full throttle. And this isn't science fiction, folks. These are real therapies in development. Things like Avinacumab, which is an antibody, or zodasiran, which is a really cutting-edge therapy that basically silences specific genes. These are showing they can lower triglycerides like never before, and they offer incredible new hope for patients who have been the hardest to treat. Which brings us right back to where we started this whole investigation. For decades, about half the reason people get heart disease has been a total mystery. We've chased down the clues, we've unmasked this hidden culprit in our blood, and we followed the evidence all the way to a new generation of super-targeted therapies. And so we're left with this one last incredible question. Now that we've finally identified the real bad guy, are we on the verge of finally solving the other half of the heart disease puzzle?